Hi, my name is Michelle Hollenbaugh, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about stress management. So I'm a faculty member here at TAMCC in the Counseling and Educational Psychology Department, and one of the things I specialize in is a treatment called dialectical behavior therapy. And this is important because this type of treatment is all based on emotion regulation, and that's what stress is. Stress is about managing our emotions. So what we'll talk about a little bit today is we'll talk about the basics of emotions and emotion regulation. We'll also talk about mindfulness practice and why that can be really important for you to help manage stress on a daily basis. And then distress tolerance skills. And when I talk about distress tolerance, I'm really talking about how to cope in a situation that you can't change right away. So if you've got a big test coming up and you know you need to study and get through, with finals or other major assignments, you can't change that situation right away because you still have the stress of that assignment. But there are different things that you can do that can help you cope with that situation, and that's what those skills can help you with. All right. So I've mentioned this a little bit before, that emotions are related to stress. When you are feeling stressed, think about it a second. What kind of emotions are you actually experiencing? Maybe some anxiety. You might feel overwhelmed. You might feel frustrated. And so all of these emotions are related to experiencing stress. Now, you should care about this because if you want to manage stress, you need to be able to manage your emotions. And one of the major things that research has shown is that people who have higher emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is not only the ability to be aware of others' emotions, but also the ability to be aware of your own emotions and how to communicate them effectively. And research has shown that individuals who have higher levels of emotional intelligence actually are more successful in life than others who do not have as high of emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is related to regulating our emotions. And if we are able to effectively regulate our emotions, we are able to effectively manage stress and possibly be more successful in the future. Okay, so I want you to think a second and think if you can name all of the basic emotions. So there are several basic emotions that are the same across cultures. It's joy, sadness, anger, guilt, fear, disgust, surprise, and interest. So we know that there are basic emotions that we all experience, regardless of the culture or language that you speak. The question is, why do we have emotions? What do they do for us? Well, if you think about it, emotions help us understand what's going on in the situation. It communicates to you that there might be something wrong or something different or something good. It also helps us communicate to others, right? If we express anger or sadness, we are communicating this to others. Emotions also can help motivate us. It can enhance our ability to take action when needed. And this is the crux of it because sometimes people get the impression that emotions are bad, or certain emotions are bad, for example, anger. But emotions aren't bad. In fact, emotions happen to us. What can be unhelpful is when we aren't able to manage them effectively and the consequences that we have. So if you're engaging in some sort of behavior related to your emotion, that can have negative consequences. But again, the emotions themselves are not bad. So how did you learn to manage your emotions? Think about it for a little bit. Most of us learn to manage our emotions in our families, from our parents or loved ones, from our siblings. That's usually how we understand how to manage and communicate emotions. And so that can be different for a lot of different families and a lot of different cultures, as well as between genders. It's commonly known that men aren't allowed to be emotional or experience emotions. There's one emotion they are allowed to communicate and experience, and that's anger. But as a society, we have a tendency to judge men who are emotional or who cry. So when we're talking about ways to manage our emotions, there's some pretty standard research that talks about the different ways to do that. And there are healthy and unhealthy ways to do this. So consistently, the research shows that people who are able to change the way they think about a situation are able, it's the healthiest way to manage your emotions if you're able to change the way you think about it. So changing your thoughts and changing how you view it. There are two ways of managing emotions that have consistently been found to be really unhealthy. One of those is suppression. Studies have shown that people who suppress their emotions might have physical problems, as well as they actually remember less about what happened. So this one study had, they researched people who were in arguments, and it showed that the people who were in the argument and suppressed emotions during the argument didn't remember as much about what happened in the argument as those who used more healthy ways of regulating emotions. And it's the same with people who suppress emotions. They found that they are more likely to report unhappiness with their employment and less likely to be successful in their careers. Rumination is another one that can be really unhealthy. And part of that is because it reactivates the emotion over and over again. And it can maintain it, it could also increase it. And as a result, because you are kind of ruminating and thinking over and over about the situation, instead of changing how you think about it, it can actually increase risk for mental health disorders, and also it limits your ability to come up with a solution. Okay, so we started out talking about how stress is actually related to emotions, right? And we started out by talking about what emotions are, what they do for us. And now we've talked about how there are healthy and unhealthy ways to manage emotions, right? And we've talked about the fact that the healthiest way to manage our emotions is to change the way we think, right? And there's a lot of research in the field that I work in the psychology field about changing how we think about situations to manage our emotions. Well, some of the researchers have found that there are certain thinking mistakes that we all engage in, and that these thinking mistakes can lead to difficulty regulating our emotions, or experiencing negative emotions more often. This can lead to higher levels of stress and anxiety or sadness or anger. So let's go through each of these thinking mistakes and talk about them one by one. So the first one is black and white thinking. And this talks about when you go from one extreme to the other. So either my assignment needs to be done perfectly or it's an absolute disaster, right? The next one is catastrophizing, and they often call that fortune-telling error. And what that means is that looking ahead, you look ahead to the future and catastrophize and think that the worst thing that could ever happen is going to happen. So you might tell yourself, I'm definitely going to fail this class. Mind reading is the thinking mistake where we believe that we know what the other person is thinking without them actually telling us. So for example, if somebody doesn't say hi to you and then you think they must be angry with you, that sort of thing. Overgeneralization is a sweeping negative conclusion that can go beyond the situation, right? So I did poorly in class today, so I will do poorly every day. Mental filter is about only seeing or hearing the negative aspects. So for example, if you get feedback on an assignment or you get evaluations on a presentation, mental filter talks about that you would only focus on the negative. And that goes along with the next one, which is disqualifying the positive. And so basically, if you would look at that evaluation, you would focus on the negative aspects and not focus on the positive aspects. And this is a really easy thinking mistake to fall into. The next one is emotional reasoning. And emotional reasoning talks about the fact that you're experiencing the emotion. So then you believe that whatever you're experiencing must be true, right? So you associate emotions as actual facts. So I feel incompetent, therefore I must be incompetent. The next one are should statements, and should statements have to do with the fact that you are thinking that you should be doing something. And this can be really difficult for graduate students because often when you do take time to engage in self-care and spend time with friends, you find yourself thinking that you should be doing work instead. And so we often talk about not shoulding on ourselves. Labeling takes things a step further and actually takes it to the point where you're calling yourself names, saying, oh, I'm stupid, I'm worthless. And personalization has to do with seeing yourself as the cause for things that don't have to do with you or you don't have control over. And so all of these are different thinking mistakes that we can fall into. And so take a minute and I want you to think about any of these that you think that you might engage in, either sometimes or on a regular basis. Sometimes you'll find that we engage in these thoughts and we don't even realize that we're doing it. So take a second and I want you to practice. So here we have some thinking errors. And so I'm wondering if you can come up with some alternative thoughts to challenge these thinking errors. So the first one, I'm going to fail this midterm. I don't know any of this. 2, I should be studying instead of spending time with my friends. 3, I feel totally incompetent. There's no way I can do this. Okay. So if you thought a little bit about how you can challenge these, some of the solutions that you may have come up with, for example, for number 1, an alternative thought that you could use to challenge this thinking error would be, I've studied and I'm going to do my best. For number 2, an alternative thought that you could use to challenge that thinking error could be, it's better for me to take some time to spend with friends, and it can help my studying and increase my success. For number 3, you could think, even though I feel incompetent, that doesn't mean I am incompetent. And so you see that these challenges don't have to be much. It just has to be a change in that thought. And this can be really important for you when managing stress. And so think a little bit about the thoughts that you have when you are feeling really stressed, even when you don't realize it. And that's why this takes us to mindfulness, right? So we've talked about these thinking errors and we've talked about how to challenge these thinking errors. But the problem is that if we don't know that we're engaging in these thinking errors, it can be really tough for us to then try to challenge them. And so that's why mindfulness practice is really, really important. In case you're not familiar with mindfulness, there's mindfulness meditation and then there's mindfulness practice. And mindfulness is a skill. It's not necessarily a meditation, though it can be, but mindfulness is a skill and it has to do with controlling your thoughts and being present in the moment. And we control our thoughts so then they don't control us. It has to do with being fully aware in the moment and also just controlling your attention. And so when we think about our lives, we're built to multitask, right? That's what we do as individuals. But if you actually want to control how you think, you need to focus on one thing. So this can help us make important decisions. It can help focus your attention and make you more effective and productive. It can lessen your pain, tension, and stress, and it can increase your compassion for yourself and others. So one of the important things about mindfulness is it's not just something that you want to use when you're feeling really stressed. Mindfulness takes practice, and the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And so that's why it's really important to engage in some mindfulness exercises every day. Now, mindfulness practice can be doing anything. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you are controlling your thoughts in the moment. So there are a few things we do when we're being mindful. We observe, describe, and participate in the moment, and we do these things non-judgmentally and effectively. So your first skill, the very basis of mindfulness, is just observing. And when we observe, we just notice what's going on without actually thinking or judging any of it. And that's why they say it's like having a Teflon mind, because nothing sticks. You are alert and aware, and that's it. This can be really difficult. The next one is describe. And when we describe, we put words without judgment. It's very important to be non-judgmental when we're being mindful, because we can end up judging ourselves, we can end up judging others. And so we try to just put words on the experience and only think about what we observe. So I have a couple of examples that I want to share with you. And so I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to think a minute, and I want you to think of ways to describe that picture, just the facts. Okay, so hopefully you've thought a little bit about this, and you've thought of some ways to non-judgmentally describe this person. So you might say white and blue hair, or fishnet stockings, or wearing makeup. These are all non-judgmental, right? They're the facts. All right, let's try another one. Same here. So you might say black hair, blue uniform. Anything that you know is not a judgment. It's not based on your opinion, but it's an actual fact. All right, last one. So I think this one might be the toughest. But again, if you just look for the facts, you could say red tie, blue suit, blonde hair. And this is why it's really important for us to practice our skills and use just our described skills non-judgmentally, because then if there's something that does incite a lot of emotion in you, you're able to just stay non-judgmental and be mindful. So the last skill is participate. And when we participate, we throw ourselves into the moment because we know that it'll be good for us, even when we don't want to. And if you think about it, have you ever thought about a time when you were just in the zone and you were working on something and you were completely focused on that and nothing else? And that's what it means to participate and to use your participate skill, because you are focused in the moment. All right, so I want you to take a second. I want you to find a comfortable position. Now, with mindfulness practice, and again, there are lots of different ways to practice mindfulness, but this is one that actually starts with controlling your thoughts. With mindfulness practice, it's more about finding a comfortable position. You can close your eyes if you want, but you don't have to. What you may want to do, though, is to find a place in the room that you can focus on, and you can just look at that place in the room so you don't get distracted. And so I want you to take a minute, and I want you to imagine that everything that you experience in that moment, whether it's a thought, whether it's emotion, or a sensation, that all of those things are going by in front of you on a conveyor belt. And so you're just going to notice and observe them go by. You may find one interesting, so you might pick it up and observe it, but then put it back. And so just try to stay non-judgmental. Now, if you've never practiced mindfulness, it may be really easy to get distracted. That's fine. Just bring yourself right back. Okay. So I'm wondering what you noticed. Think a little bit about that. What was that experience like for you? You also may have gotten distracted. That's fine. Again, when we're mindful, it takes practice, and then it's not as easy to get distracted because you are used to managing your thoughts. And I know you're probably thinking that you don't have time to practice mindfulness every day. You are busy as it is as a graduate student. And so what I usually tell my students is that find something that you do every day anyways, whether that's taking a shower, whether that's doing the dishes, whether that's driving, and that can be your mindfulness practice for the day. And whatever that is, during that moment, you are just focused on that and all of the sensations and everything you're experiencing in that moment and not thinking about anything else. All right, we're going to move on a little bit now that we've talked about mindfulness. And we're going to talk a little bit about our distress tolerance skills, which I mentioned before. So these are skills that we use when we can't change things right away. So in general, in life, there are 5 ways of responding when a serious problem happens. So you can figure out how to solve the problem. You can change how you feel about the problem. You can accept it. You can stay miserable. Or you can make things worse. So our distress tolerance skills are for when we can't do 1 and 2. We don't know how to solve the problem and we can't change the way we feel about it. So when we're talking about accepting reality, we're not talking about saying that whatever's happening is okay. When we accept reality, we aren't approving. What we are doing is recognizing the fact that this is what's going on whether we like it or not. And so it might be easier, instead of saying reality acceptance, you could say instead that you are acknowledging or recognizing or even enduring the situation. And it might seem really mean to say, oh, you should accept reality, even in situations that are really difficult, for example, the loss of a loved one. But reality acceptance is about accepting everything about reality, including the fact that when something's really stressful or really sad, that it's really hard for you to cope with. So, for example, if I receive a bill, say I get a bill, it's a cell phone bill, say, and it's more than I expected it to be. I didn't expect it to be this much. I'm not really sure what happened. Until I accept the fact that I received that bill, I can't do anything about it. And I can sit and be upset and, say, wow, I can't even believe I got this bill. This is crazy, which causes more suffering, right? It was painful to get the bill in the first place, but by not accepting it, I am then suffering. And what I have to do is I have to, it's almost like choosing a fork in the road, choosing the path of acceptance. And so you can even envision this, right? You have two paths that you can take, and you can choose the path of accepting reality and say, yes, this happened. And this isn't something that you do once and then you move on. So if I get this bill and I say, okay, I'm going to choose a path of acceptance, and I go on with my day, and then all of a sudden I realize I'm ruminating on this again and thinking about, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got this bill. This is ridiculous. This is a scam. And so then again, I have to choose the path, and you have to choose the path of acceptance over and over and over again. Some people have a really tough time with this. They might actually say, how can you tell me to accept reality when you don't know my reality? And so one of the examples we really like to use is that, say, for example, you're going to the mall, and you go to the mall because you need to buy a pair of shoes. So when you go to the mall, you need to figure out where you're going, so you find that map. And you find the place on the map that says you are here. Accepting reality is that spot. It's figuring out where you are, figuring out the lay of the land, and then figuring out where you need to go. So I encourage you to use this when you find yourself ruminating on a situation or having difficulty accepting a situation because you're angry or upset. By accepting reality, again, you're not saying it's okay, but you're keeping yourself from suffering, even in a situation that is really painful. Okay, so we're going to move on to another distress tolerance skill, and this skill is called coping ahead. What's neat about this skill is it has to do with planning ahead for emotional situations. So this may be at the beginning of the semester, taking a look at the syllabus and looking at the times when you know things are going to be the most stressful. And what you do then is you describe the situation that is likely to create the negative emotions, and then decide what skills you want to use to cope with that situation, whether that's self-care, whether that's mindfulness, whatever that is that you're going to want to use. So when we use the skill cope ahead, what we do is we identify the situation that we might experience that might be really stressful, and we decide what skills we want to use. We think about this ahead of time. So I know I'm going to be really stressed out in this situation. What do I want to do when that time comes? And then you're actually going to sit there and you're going to imagine the situation in your mind as vividly as possible. Think about all the different details of what will be going on, where you will be, what you will be doing. And then you're going to rehearse using that coping skill that you thought of, and you're going to rehearse using that in your mind. So I want you to go ahead and take a minute and do that now. So think of an upcoming situation that will likely be stressful for you over the next couple weeks. This could be an exam or a project or a job interview. And while thinking of that situation, think about what you will be able to do in the moment to cope with the stress and anxiety. So I want you to take a moment now and imagine using these coping skills in this situation. So just take a moment and be aware and think about what it would be like. So what did you notice when you were thinking about that situation? Hopefully you noticed that you will be able to use those coping skills and that perhaps they'd be helpful in the future to decrease your stress and increase your ability to be successful in that situation. All right, so I have one last skill to share with you, and that skill is called opposite action. And opposite action has to do with actually doing the opposite of the emotions, action, urge that you're experiencing. So you might be feeling really angry, and so you might want to yell at someone. But using opposite action actually says that you should do the opposite of that. So maybe do something kind for somebody else. So this works best when the emotion does not fit the facts. So for example, you know that you might be feeling an emotion that doesn't necessarily fit that situation, or the emotion is just really, really intense. And so you're experiencing it and you're having difficulty managing it. So let's look at these situations, for example, and we can kind of go through them and think about different ways that you could use opposite action. So the first one, you know that asking your professor for permission to miss class to attend a conference will not result in a penalty or a grade reduction, but you still can't seem to find the courage to ask. So in this situation, you're experiencing fear, right, or anxiety. And so the opposite action would be to go forward and to talk to that professor. All right, so the next one, you emailed your professor with a question about your assignment and did not receive feedback by the next day. You feel rejected and angry all day as you think your effort to further understand the assignment is not being recognized. Then you find out your professor had a family emergency and was unable to check his email. So think about this one for a minute. What would the opposite action be? So if the emotion you were experiencing was anger, your opposite action might be to do something nice or to give kind words to your professor. All right, it's your first time attending a major conference in another state and you don't want to miss out on anything. Due to bad weather, the flight is canceled and you are rescheduled on another flight that leaves the next day. This means you will miss out on the first day and opening activities at the conference. You become angry in the airport, yelling at airline workers and tweeting mean things about the airline. So again, the opposite action here would be to do something kind, even though you're feeling really angry, and even though this is a really stressful situation, right? So part of this is acknowledging and accepting the difficulty of the situation and then choosing to manage your anger by doing the opposite action. And so you could be nice and kind to airline workers or tweet nice things online. All right, last one. You are very anxious and overwhelmed because of your upcoming comprehensive examination. You avoid studying so you don't have to deal with the thoughts about the comprehensive examination. This one seems pretty obvious, right? You really would want to go ahead and go forth with the studying even though it makes you feel anxious, because that's the opposite action of avoiding it. So think about some times in the future or even in the past where you could have used opposite action and generate some ideas as to what that would be like. And in general, now that we're coming to the end of the presentation, in what situations do you think you could use all of these skills? Think about that. And then also I want you to think about what challenges you might face. Because what often happens is we learn new information, we learn about skills, and then we get back to our real life and we forget. We forget what we've learned. And so I want you to think about what those barriers might be to keep you from using these skills to manage stress and how you will overcome them. It may be that you will need reminders or make notes, whatever it is that you can use these skills to help manage your stress. Remember, the most important factor throughout all of this is being mindful, because if you want to be aware and aware of what's going on and change the way you think and use radical acceptance and use your coping skills, you need to be aware in the moment, and that's why mindfulness is the most important. And I hope that that's what you take away from this, if nothing else. And so try to think of a time that you can practice mindfulness in your everyday life. And it doesn't have to be something that you're adding on. It can just be something that you're doing already. And this will help you manage your emotions and manage your stress and hopefully help you be more successful. Thank you so much for your time.